Feeling comfortable? Warm? Got the thermostat set to that perfect temperature? Good. Now imagine it's all gone. Suddenly, you're a player in a game you never signed up for. The board is a frozen medieval landscape, and its only goal is to kill you before sunrise. Because in the Middle Ages, winter wasn't just a season, it was a predator. And the peasants? They didn't play to win. They played to not die. To do that, they used a set of secrets so brutal, so desperate. They weren't carved into the monuments of kings. They were written in the bones of the dead and the dirt of forgotten farms. Tonight, we read from that manual. So, what was the first secret in this twisted game of survival? A rule that redefines the idea of a full house. Picture a small windowless hut, a family of 5 huddled on a bed of straw. But they weren't alone. Sharing that cramped, dark space were their most valuable assets. The family cow, a couple of sheep, maybe a pig. This wasn't about companionship. This was a biological radiator. The sheer body heat radiating from a large animal in a tiny sealed room could raise the temperature by several crucial degrees, the difference between shivering through the night and simply not waking up. It sounds ingenious, but here's the macabre part, the price they paid for that warmth. As historian Francis Geese details, this arrangement was a biological time bomb. The air was a foul mixture of human breath, animal breath, and the constant, overpowering stench of manure. The straw on the floor was a damp, shared mattress for both people and beasts, a perfect breeding ground for fleas, lice, and bacteria. Every night was a gamble, escaping the clean death of the cold outside to only invite the dirty death of disease inside. It wasn't a home. It was a high-stakes biological experiment with terrible ventilation, and you thought your landlord was bad. But if you think what they shared their house was shocking, you wait until you hear what they shared their clothes with. So, the house was a shared biological nightmare, but the most intimate and perhaps most disgusting defense against the cold was something they wore 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This second macabre secret wasn't a place, it was a second skin. Now, peasants understood layering, sure, but their version would make a modern survivalist's stomach turn. They almost never washed their clothes in winter. Water was a precious resource that had to be hauled and heated, and drying anything in the damp, freezing air was a multi-day ordeal they simply couldn't afford. So they just didn't. They'd wear the same woolen tunic for weeks, then months on end. As sweat, body oils, and dirt accumulated, the fabric would become stiff and matted. This unintentionally created a dense, almost windproof barrier against the biting gales, but that seal came with tenants. After months of wear, the clothes weren't just fabric, they were a thriving ecosystem, a warm, walking paradise for fleas, lice, and other parasites. This living skin was their armor against the wind, but it also feasted on them day and night, bringing with it the constant threat of infection and disease. It was a deeply macabre trade-off. Insulate your body with a layer of your own filth. It really makes you rethink complaining about your uncle who wears the same sweater to every family gathering, doesn't it? Tell me in the comments, what's the most aromatic situation you've ever had to politely endure? But at least that armor of filth protected them from an enemy they could feel. The real kicker, the one thing they trusted most to keep them alive, was the same thing that was poisoning them from the inside out. Every peasant hut had a heart, the central fire pit. It was a symbol of life, of community, the only thing standing between the family and the icy grip of the outdoors. But that heart was pumping poison into the room. You see that charming medieval cottage with a little stone chimney puffing out smoke? That was for the landowner, the well-off. The poorest peasants lived in wattle and daub huts with thatched roofs. To keep every precious bit of heat inside, there were no real windows, and crucially, no chimney. At best, you had a small hole in the roof, which was often blocked to stop the warmth from escaping. So where did all the smoke go? Nowhere. It just filled the room. swirling in a thick, acrid haze that never truly left. For months, the family lived and slept while breathing in a toxic cocktail of soot, particulates, and carbon monoxide. It was a slow, invisible killer. Chronic respiratory diseases were a fact of life. Their lungs were likely black with soot by the time they were adults. The daily choice was a brutal one: die quickly from the freezing cold outside, or die slowly from the very air you breathe inside. They were fighting a war against the visible enemy outside the door and the invisible enemy floating in the air around them. But the most terrifying battle was the one they had to fight inside their own heads. Because surviving the winter wasn't just about keeping the body from freezing, it was about stopping the mind from shattering. For months on end, the peasant hut wasn't a home, it was a prison. Imagine it. You're trapped in a single, dark, smoke-filled room with 6 other people and a cow. You haven't seen clear sunlight in days. The only sound from the outside is the howling wind, a sound that medieval folklore taught you was the scream of demons and evil spirits roaming the frozen earth. So you seal every crack, not just against the cold, but against the supernatural terrors of the endless night. This self-imposed solitary confinement was a psychological torture chamber. The darkness, the lack of stimulation, the constant fear, it was the perfect recipe for what we now call cabin fever. Depression, paranoia, and sudden, violent bursts of aggression were common. The greatest enemy wasn't the frostbite on your toes, but the creeping madness of isolation. They had to survive the monster outside the door, and the one that started growing inside their own mind. If this journey into the darkness of the human spirit is already giving you chills, leave a like to keep our bonfire lit, and subscribe to the channel, because you won't want to get lost out here alone when the next story begins. Of course, it's time for the turning point and the powerful conclusion. Here are the final 4 blocks of the script, crafted to build on the established tension, introduce a shocking twist, and end with a thought-provoking and powerful statement. So you've survived the air, the filth, and the creeping madness in your own head. But every single day, there was one final primal enemy to defeat: hunger. And by the time late winter rolled around, the family menu got, let's say, creative. This wasn't about finding food, it was about redefining the word food even meant. The 5th macabre secret was the gastronomy of desperation. After months in the damp, the grain stores were often teeming with weevils and insects. The salted meat, their only real source of protein, would begin to turn, giving off a rancid smell that could make your eyes water. The dried vegetables, their last hope for vitamins, could be covered in a sinister layer of blue or green mold. And they ate it, all of it. They didn't have the luxury of being picky. They'd bake the weevils right into the bread, adding a little extra unwanted protein. They'd chew through the tough, foul-tasting meat. They'd scrape the mold off the vegetables and pray they got it all. It was the world's most dangerous tasting menu. Every meal was a game of Russian roulette with food poisoning. That stomach ache wasn't just indigestion. It could be the start of a dysentery that would kill you faster than the cold ever could. Forget farm to table. This was floor to table. And you thought that weird casserole your aunt brings to Thanksgiving was scary. But as disgusting as their diet was, the most shocking source of heat was something they created themselves, from the very waste they produced. So the fire is just cold ash. Every piece of firewood is gone. Where could you possibly find another source of heat in a world made of ice? The answer was right outside the door. And it smelled exactly as bad as you think. The 6th and perhaps most disgustingly ingenious secret was the fermentation furnace. Every medieval hut had a midden heap, or dunhill, a pile of everything you don't want to think about: animal manure, human waste from the chamber pots, rotting straw, kitchen scraps. It was a pile of absolute filth. But peasants were masters of observation, and they noticed that on the coldest days, this steaming pile of garbage was actually steaming. Decomposition generates heat, it's basic biology, and they used it. The wall of the hut closest to the dunghill would be noticeably warmer than the others. So on the most brutal nights, the family would abandon the fire pit and huddle against that one specific wall, drawing warmth from the slow, steady heat produced by a fermenting pile of their own waste. The secret wasn't just enduring filth, it was weaponizing it. It was harnessing the very power of rot to defy the cold. It's an incredible testament to human ingenuity, but it raises a terrifying question. If they were willing to go this far to save their own lives, what were they willing to do when it came to the lives of others? This is the last secret, the darkest one. Because this one isn't about filth or poison or psychology, it's about a choice. In the dead of winter, resources were finite. Every piece of bread, every scrap of meat was counted, and a family's survival depended on a brutal, unspoken calculus. The final, most macabre secret wasn't an action, it was an inaction. It was the silent abandonment. The weakest members of the household, the elderly who could no longer work, the chronically ill, the child who wouldn't stop coughing, they became a liability. Another mouth to feed, consuming the precious calories needed for the strong to survive and work the fields come spring. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no tearful farewells. It was a slow, quiet, and deeply pragmatic cruelty. Their food portions would get a little smaller. They'd be given the thinnest blanket. They would be moved furthest from the fire. It was a passive, unspoken death sentence, understood by everyone, but acknowledged by no one. The survival of the family was paid for by the quiet sacrifice of its most vulnerable members. It's the most macabre secret of all, because the monster they were fighting wasn't the cold anymore. It was simple, brutal math. So, they survived by sleeping with animals, wearing their own filth, breathing poison, eating rot, huddling against dung, and making impossible choices. What do we even do with that information? These macabre secrets are more than just historical trivia. They are a brutal testament to the terrifying, unyielding resilience of the human spirit. They show us that survival isn't pretty, it's desperate, it's disgusting, and sometimes it's morally horrifying. They hold up a mirror to our own comfortable, climate-controlled lives and force us to ask a difficult question. The question isn't just, could you have survived? That's too simple. The real question is, in our quest for comfort and safety, in removing every last bit of risk and hardship from our lives, what part of that desperate, ingenious, unbreakable survival instinct have we lost? And would we even know how to find it again if we had to? Our bonfire is lit, but it needs keepers to survive the night. Join our brotherhood and subscribe so this forgotten wisdom is never extinguished. Now tell me in the comments, which of these macabre secrets chilled your soul the most? Leave your like as a gesture, a piece of wood to keep this flame burning bright. And share this story, spread its embers so that knowledge may ignite new minds in the darkness. Now look to the video appearing on screen. That next story is crucial, because surviving the cold is nothing compared to surviving those who hide in the coming spring.